Are you unknowingly sabotaging your fantasy story with critical plot mistakes? Most writers make at least one of these 10 mistakes when working on their stories, and each of them turns an epic tale into a boring collection of words. After 2 decades of writing and analyzing fantasy literature, I've noticed these plot mistakes ruin stories again and again, and the worst part is they are entirely avoidable. So in this video, I'll show you practical techniques that will tighten your plot and elevate your storytelling. And I'll even reveal my one plotting technique that has transformed my writing and will keep your story from falling apart again as well, if used right. But let's start with the first mistake. How well do you really know your characters? In one of the stories that I wrote many years ago, the protagonist, a young sorcerer, embarked on a quest to find a mythical stone. Initially, it all seemed exciting, but as chapters passed, it became evident that the sorcerer had no personal stakes or reasons for his journey. He simply moved from one event to another because the plot demanded it. Despite the vivid world around him, this lack of personal conviction made the entire journey feel hollow. It's a problem present in too many stories, and to avoid this pitfall, it's crucial to define what your characters want early in your story. The goal doesn't need to be earth-shattering. It could be as simple as finding a lost relative or as complex as overthrowing a corrupt empire. Here's a simple process to ensure your characters have compelling goals. First, define the goal. What does your character want more than anything? Next, connect it to the conflict. How does this goal drive them to engage with the main plot? Lastly, illustrate the journey. Show how they pursue this goal, overcome obstacles, and grow. Think of your character's goal as the compass guiding them through the treacherous terrain of your plot. Without this compass, they and your readers will quickly lose direction and interest. So if your protagonist is wandering aimlessly like a lost tourist in a theme park, it's time to give them a map and a mission. Because trust me, nobody wants to follow a hero who looks like they are just trying to find the nearest restroom. But what if your character's goals are clear, yet this story still feels sluggish? In that case, you might be dealing with our next mistake. Consider a protagonist who merely reacts to the events at all times, never making decisions that push the plot forward. While they might have goals, they aren't doing anything about them. It's like watching a leaf being tossed into a storm. There's movement, but no purpose. Bilbo Baggins is like this initially in The Hobbit. He starts off as more of an observer, but his journey eventually transforms him. If Bilbo had stayed passive, drifting from one event to the next without making his own decisions, the essence of his transformation would have been lost. As a result, the entire spirit of the adventure would have felt empty and uninspiring. Now, to transform a passive protagonist into an active one, start by giving them decisions that impact the story's direction. Here's how you can do this. First, challenge them early. Introduce a significant obstacle right from the start that forces them to act. Just like Bilbo, who ultimately decides to join the adventure despite his initial hesitation, your protagonist should face a dilemma or threat that requires a proactive response. Secondly, craft crucial decision points. Make sure to regularly confront the protagonist with choices that have meaningful consequences. And lastly, provoke the plot. Let the protagonist make moves that demand responses from other characters or the world itself, rather than always being on the receiving end. Integrating these elements ensures that your protagonist is not just a bystander in their own story. After all, nobody reads a fantasy novel to see the hero carried along by the plot like a shopping cart taken for a joyride. While it might be fun to watch for a moment, it ultimately isn't going anywhere meaningful. An active protagonist, on the other hand, not only drives the plot themselves, but also deepens the reader's investment in their journey. But what if your protagonist is active, their goals are clear, yet the story still falls flat? Then perhaps the next mistake is the bane of your narrative. Think back for a moment. Have you ever been lost in a fantasy epic, drowning in a sea of characters and subplots, unsure what's really happening? This sense of confusion can often result from a common temptation many new writers face. Instead of honing in on a few key elements, they introduce layers upon layers of complexity. While complex plots can be captivating when each thread adds depth and meaning, without careful planning, these threads can entangle and lead to a convoluted mess that leaves readers more puzzled than intrigued. Take for example a fantasy saga where the realm is on the brink of war. Intriguing, right? But then introduce a dozen factions, each with its own leaders, agendas, and arcane magic systems. And suddenly the main plot of stopping the war gets lost in the shuffle. Now, simplifying doesn't mean dumbing down your own story. Instead, it means making sure that every element serves the narrative. Here's how you can easily refine an overcomplicated plot. First, focus on core elements. Identify the central conflict and ensure all subplots and character arcs support this main thread. If a subplot doesn't advance the central story, consider cutting it or integrating it more deeply. Next, limit the cast of characters. Too many characters can dilute the story's focus. Concentrate on developing a few key players deeply rather than many superficially. This will increase the emotional investment of your readers. Then, streamline subplots. If a subplot is essential, weave it seamlessly into the main plot to enhance the overarching story. Each subplot should have clear connections to the main conflict or character development. Lastly, clarify the timeline. Overlapping or confusing timelines can complicate the narrative unnecessarily. Ensure that the sequence of events is easy to follow and logical, which will help maintain clarity for your readers. A well-told tale strikes the perfect balance between complexity and clarity, and by avoiding the trap of overcomplication, you can ensure that your story remains engaging and accessible. But even with a streamlined plot, what happens when the details that should support your plot start to fall apart? Have you ever been pulled out of a story because something just didn't add up? Perhaps a character performed an impossible feat with ease, or a seemingly invincible fortress was overtaken too quickly. These moments define our next mistake, and they can disrupt the flow and believability of your narrative, leaving readers confused and dissatisfied. Let's consider Game of Thrones. One of its strengths lies in its meticulously crafted world. Every region has its own customs, landscapes, and politics, creating a rich foundation that supports the plot. But imagine if Winterfell suddenly had tropical weather, or if the Iron Bank forgave all debts without reason. Such inconsistencies would create glaring plot holes and as a result undermine the story's credibility. Where the rules of the world are bent or broken to serve the plot, readers are feeling cheated. Inconsistent or shallow world building can inadvertently create these types of plot holes. To avoid this, it's essential to weave your world's details carefully into the narrative. Here's how you can do that. First, establish clear rules. Define the physical, magical, and social rules of your world early on. Consistency in these rules will help maintain the plot's integrity. Then integrate history and culture. Let the world's backstory influence the plot naturally. This step can explain character motivations and conflicts, making the plot overall more believable. And lastly, ensure geographical logic. Travel times, resource availability, and strategic locations should all make sense within your world's framework. Imagine your plot as a puzzle. If the pieces are from different puzzles, the picture will never come together. Maintaining consistency in your world building is like ensuring all your puzzle pieces come from the same set. But even a meticulously built world can fall apart if something crucial is overlooked. Imagine the build-up of an intricate mystery, where every clue seems to point towards a revelation that promises to shock and awe. The excitement builds, your anticipation peaks, and then the resolution falls flat. Something is missing. Perhaps the villain's motives are left unexplained, or a major plot twist is ignored in the climax. This can leave a lingering sense of dissatisfaction, as if the contract between writer and reader has been broken. Such issues often stem from the initial promises not being fulfilled, which is crucial in maintaining trust and satisfaction with your audience. For instance, if you introduce a legendary sword that is said to be key to your plot, but it ends up having no significant impact, readers will feel cheated. Or say, for example, you promise your viewers a simple yet incredible plotting technique, and then you end the video without ever mentioning it again. We don't want any of such things. So to ensure that you always deliver on your promises and keep your audience satisfied, consider these strategies. First, track all setups. Keep a detailed list of all the promises and setups introduced throughout your story. This can include character secrets, prophesized events, introduced mysteries, or hinted conflicts. Next, deliver on expectations. If you set up a significant expectation, deliver on it in a way that aligns with the build-up. Avoid introducing major elements or twists late in the story that seem to resolve earlier setups without proper development. Then, use the climax effectively. Structure your climax to address the main setups introduced throughout the story. This is your opportunity to weave together various story threads into a cohesive and satisfying conclusion. And lastly, provide closure. While not every minor detail needs a full resolution, key plot points and character arcs should come to a satisfying conclusion. If certain elements are meant for future stories, hint at their exploration in sequels or spin-offs. A well-paid-off setup enhances the reader's experience, reinforcing the impact of your story and their likelihood to pick up a story of yours again. But what if your story, despite having well-paid-off setups, still feels like it's missing something essential? Have you ever read a story where battles are fought, kingdoms rise and fall, and yet something feels off? Perhaps characters are making significant decisions, but their choices seem to vanish into thin air, leaving no trace. Consider the intricate dance of consequences in A Song of Ice and Fire. Each move by the characters, whether bold or subtle, sets off a cascade of events that reshape the world around them. Ned Stark's fateful decision to confront Cersei Lannister is not just a moment of high drama, it sparks a series of reactions that propel the plot forward in unexpected ways. In contrast, picture a plot where a hero defeats the villain, yet everything returns to normal as if nothing happened. This completely deflates the tension of the narrative. It's like throwing a surprise party where everyone forgets to yell, "Surprise!" Sure, it's still a party, but where's the fun? To prevent this, think about how the actions within your story reverberate through your world. Here are 5 points to consider for this. First, consider cause and effect. For every major action, think about the ripple effects. What immediate and long-term impacts will this decision have on the characters and the world? Second, look at character development. Show how characters grow and change in response to the consequences of their actions. The evolution should feel natural and earned. Third, ensure plot progression. Use the aftermath of significant events to drive the plot forward. Consequences should create new conflicts and challenges, keeping the narrative dynamic and engaging. Fourth, don't ignore consistency. Ensure that similar actions have similar consequences throughout your story. This maintains internal logic and helps build a believable world. And fifth, use escalation. Allow consequences to escalate tension. Small actions can lead to significant changes, building up to a climax that feels both inevitable and surprising. Weaving in these elements will make your readers feel the weight of each decision, the tension of each conflict, and the satisfaction of seeing actions have meaningful outcomes. Now, if you found anything useful in the video so far, please consider giving it a like to help me grow the channel. Thank you. Even when characters face consequences though, another pitfall lurks that can derail your plot in an instant. Imagine your story is moving along, engaging and exciting, but suddenly it hits a snag. The momentum stalls, or the exact opposite, events start to rush by ever so quickly. Consider Anakin Skywalker's transformation into Darth Vader in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This pivotal arc is often criticized for its rushed pacing. Anakin's shift from a conflicted Jedi Knight to a Sith Lord happens abruptly, with significant character changes occurring in a very short span. Despite moments of intense action and internal conflict, the rapid transition undermines the believability of his fall. While viewers see battles and confrontations to some degree, the quieter scenes that should explore his internal struggles and relationships are insufficient to justify his drastic actions. This imbalance leaves the audience questioning his motivations and feeling disconnected from his journey. To maintain the right flow and keep readers hooked, consider these 3 strategies. First, vary plot intensity. Just like a well-paced story, your plot should have a rhythm. Alternate between higher-stake action scenes and slower character-focused moments. Next, balance action with reflection. Follow intense scenes with quieter moments that allow for character development and give readers a chance to absorb what happened. Lastly, control information flow. Reveal critical details gradually to maintain suspense and interest, rather than overwhelming the reader with too much information at once. Mastering this balance ensures that your narrative rhythm keeps readers engaged from start to finish. But let's shift gears and talk about another common mistake that can undermine your plot's impact. Have you ever felt a sense of déjà vu while reading a story, where things appear to be happening exactly as something you've encountered before? I recall working on an early draft of a fantasy novel where the hero's journey followed a very familiar path. The protagonist discovered a hidden power, met a wise mentor, faced a dark villain, and of course, saved the day. You see where I'm going here? While these elements are classic for a reason, my story felt flat because it didn't offer anything new or unexpected. Readers can see the ending of such stories from miles away, and that predictability robs the story of its potential impact. To keep your plot from becoming too predictable, consider these strategies. First, subvert expectations. Take a common trope and twist it. Introduce elements that challenge the reader's assumptions and keep them guessing. Then, develop complex characters. Create characters with depth who make unpredictable choices. Their unique motivations and actions can lead to surprising plot developments. And lastly, incorporate red herrings. Use misdirection to lead readers down one path only to reveal a different truth later. This technique can add a lot of intrigue and maintain suspense. These steps will help your story maintain its freshness and keep readers eagerly turning the pages, unsure what will happen next. But even with an engaging and seemingly unpredictable plot, there's another critical aspect to consider. Imagine a chess game where the checkmate happens within the first few moves, or a highly anticipated boxing match where one of the boxers is knocked out in the very first round. It's unexpected, sure, but also unsatisfying because things end before they really begin. A similar feeling can occur in storytelling when major conflicts resolve too hastily, at least if not followed up properly. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry's triumph over the basilisk seems like a climactic victory. Yet this resolution unfolds into a deeper intrigue as it reveals Tom Riddle's true identity as Voldemort. This discovery not only heightens the overarching narrative, but also sets the stage for more intricate and dangerous challenges in the saga, ensuring the audience remains captivated by the unfolding mysteries and threats. To craft a story that maintains tension and interest throughout, here are 4 points to consider. First, stagger major revelations. Space out key revelations and plot twists to maintain a steady release of new engaging content throughout the story. Second, develop multiple layers of conflict. When one conflict revolves, others should rise in importance, keeping the narrative dynamic and the stakes elevated. Third, enhance character depth post-conflict. If a significant conflict resolves early, use the opportunity to explore its consequences on your characters. For example, how do they change? Or what new personal challenges do they face? Fourth then is to introduce a greater threat. Sometimes defeating one antagonist early can set the stage for a bigger unexpected threat and revitalize the story's tension. By weaving these elements thoughtfully into your story, you can avoid the trap of early climaxes that leave your audience disengaged. Remember, the key to a compelling story is not just in the high stakes, but in how you explore and resolve these stakes throughout the narrative. But even if all the mistakes so far are avoided, there's still one fundamental element that can make or break your story. Imagine a story where a hero embarks on a journey, faces numerous challenges, meets interesting characters, and explores fascinating places. All good so far, right? But without a clear central struggle, the hero's journey will always lack urgency and coherence. The stakes will never feel high enough, and the narrative doesn't build toward a satisfying resolution. A central conflict is the driving force that propels your narrative forward. It's a core struggle around which all other elements revolve, giving your story purpose and direction. Without a compelling central conflict, even the most intricately designed worlds and characters can feel directionless. So to avoid this pitfall and ensure your story remains compelling, consider these strategies. First, define the core conflict early. Establish the main struggle or challenge early in the story. This gives readers a clear understanding of what's at stake and why they should care. Next, align subplots with the central conflict. Ensure that all subplots and secondary character arcs are connected to or influenced by the central conflict. This creates a cohesive narrative where every element contributes to the main story arc. Then, raise the stakes. Gradually increase the stakes of the central conflict as the story progresses. This keeps the tension high and the readers invested in the outcome. And lastly, resolve with impact. Make sure the resolution of the central conflict is impactful and satisfying. It should provide a clear payoff for the build-up throughout the story, leaving readers with a sense of closure. By focusing on a strong central conflict, you anchor your story, providing it with direction and purpose. This not only keeps readers engaged, but also ensures that every plot point and character decision feels meaningful and interconnected. Remember, your story is like a sturdy house, where each part, whether it's a character arc, subplot twist, or a setups payoff, supports its structure to ensure the house has a strong foundation. Now, speaking of setups and payoffs, let's fulfill the promise I made at the beginning of the video about a plotting technique that has transformed my writing. The plot synergy matrix, as I call it, is a powerful yet simple tool that ensures each scene serves a purpose and advances the main plot, as well as its supporting subplots and character arcs. I use Google Sheets for this, but you can also use Excel or similar tools. Let's look at a basic example of a made-up fantasy novel with 20 scenes, 2 subplots, and 2 character arcs. The main plot follows the protagonist's quest to defeat a dark sorcerer, threatening the kingdom. Yeah, I know, very original. We also have 2 subplots then, a romance subplot showing the protagonist's evolving relationship with the sidekick, and a political subplot featuring intrigues and power struggles within the kingdom. The key character arcs are the protagonist's arc from self-doubt to confident leader, and the sidekick arcs from solitary fighter to trusting companion. In the plot synergy matrix, each row represents a scene, and each column tracks how that scene impacts the main plot, subplots, and character arcs. Additionally, I include tension level and main plot advancement. Tension level rates the intensity of each scene from 1 to 10 to ensure a good balance of high and low intensity moments, keeping readers engaged. Main plot advancement, also with a scale from 1 to 10, measures how much each scene pushes the main storyline forward, avoiding unnecessary filler scenes. For example, a scene with high tension and high plot advancement is crucial and exciting, while a low tension, low advancement scene might serve as a breather or character development. The benefits of using my plot synergy matrix include the following. It ensures there are no long gaps where a subplot or character arc is ignored. It guarantees subplots and character arcs integrate well with the main plot. It also verifies character arcs develop naturally across scenes. On top of that, it provides a clear overview of the story's progression, making it easier to spot pacing issues. And it allows for easy adjustments and refinements, enhancing narrative cohesion. By adding filters to the data range, you can closely examine how each subplot and character arc develops. Filters help identify gaps or imbalances, ensuring every subplot and character arc is consistently engaging and contributes meaningfully to the main narrative. For example, filtering for the romance plot shows how often romantic elements appear and if they are evenly distributed. Filtering for the sidekick's arc reveals the sidekick's personal journey's progression. This matrix offers a bird's eye view of your story, ensuring each scene drives the narrative forward. Keep in mind that this is a very basic example. The matrix becomes a lot more useful and layered when the plot is broken down into smaller scenes, leading to less frequent subplot and character arc appearances. But even the most perfectly plotted story will fall flat if your antagonists are weak or cliched. Check out this video here where I'll reveal 8 common mistakes that can undermine your antagonist and make readers put down your story.